Hello folks, Charlie Gipple here, the owner of CG Financial Group. Hey, if you like this video, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also if you want emails in your inbox, information like this, feel free to go to the website below, which is www.cgfinancialgroupllc.com, and you will be added to that list if you subscribe at the bottom of pretty much any of the pages out there. Hey, a question that I get a lot is around indexed annuity illustrations. Yes, the mysterious indexed annuity illustrations. How do I read this stuff, Charlie? Well, quite simply, what indexed annuity illustrations are three primary categories, or at least the confusing categories are divided into three different sections. And these sections are really governed by insurance departments with the states. There are certain things that carriers cannot put into illustrations. There are certain things that carriers have to put into illustrations. And the three areas of confusion typically are around, number one, what's the first ledger that says 0%? Number two, what's the second ledger that says, like 5% or 6%, or some products like 10%? What's the difference between those two? Why two separate ledgers? But then the third area is really kind of three different boxes usually at the end. One says the least, one says the most, and one says the most recent 10-year period of time. Now, if you've ever seen these illustrations and if you've been confused about them, then you know what I'm talking about. Heck, if you've ever seen them, whether you're confused or not, you already know what I'm talking about. But let me demystify those. So first and foremost, of those three areas, you first have the guaranteed ledger. So the first ledger of the two is usually the guaranteed ledger. And what the insurance departments say is you have to show the client the worst case scenario. If the market is zero forever, what would their indexed annuity do? What would it do from really kind of three different values in that ledger? And those three values are the contract value. So without surrender charges, just assuming that you hold this contract for the 10-year surrender period or 7-year surrender period, for example, what does that contract value look like? Well, many times it's, hey, if you put in 100,000, it's going to be 100, because you can't lose money if the market drops, right? So usually you are just guaranteed your premium back. But then there's another column, which is usually the surrender value. And to simplify it, it's usually $100,000 minus the surrender charges, as well as a market value adjustment, which I'm not going to go into here. And the different market value adjustment assumptions, it can vary. Well, the third value is usually very confusing, and it looks something like minimum guaranteed contract value. And what that is basically regulations at its finest. In short, you get the two if you were to surrender the contract, Mrs. Client, Mr. Client, you get the greater of the two, minimum guaranteed contract value and surrender value. Basically, what the minimum guaranteed contract value is the state's way of saying, hey, if you have massive surrender charges, insurance company, on this policy, it's not like if the client puts in $100,000 that you can say, hey, your surrender value is only $50,000. No. Why? Because you have to have a certain minimum guaranteed contract value that client gets out. So in the year where the client surrenders, heaven forbid should they surrender, the greater of the MG SV, usually that's kind of the acronym in there, it can be called different things, and the surrender value, that's what the client gets. So in short, you have three different columns on the guaranteed ledger, and that guaranteed ledger, which is one of the three different areas of confusion, that assumes kind of the Armageddon scenario, right? The second ledger, which is what most agents point out, is this. The states say that interest rate, which is not the worst case scenario, it's usually like a 5 or 6 or 7, or there are a couple of companies that are in the double digits. The states say that carriers can use an interest rate in that kind of projected ledger that is based off the last 10-year period of time. If that product had been in existence over the last 10-year period of time, based off the caps today, based off the participation rates today, how would that product have performed from a compound average growth rate? And if the answer to that question is, say, 5%, then guess what that illustrated rate is typically going to be in that second ledger, in that second area of confusion. That is it, based off the last 10-year period of time. Even if the product had not been in existence, what the companies are able to do is to take the methodology, the rules-based methodology, and say, well, had it been in existence based off of these indices, volatility control indices, for example, here is how this product would have performed given today's caps, today's participation rates, and that percentage is this. And let's run these different columns, 3 columns primarily, as I just alluded to, as I just mentioned in the guaranteed column. Those columns also apply in that projected ledger, right? Well, let's run those out based off of not 0%, but say 5, 6, 7, 10%, whatever that percentage is. The third area of confusion is many times in these illustrations you have the best period of time. What would the average rate of return have been in this annuity? The worst period of time, what would that average rate of return have been in that annuity? What is the most recent period of time? What would the average rate of return have been in that annuity? And that is regulations mandating that, hey, you can't just say, hey, here's the last 10 years in the ledger, and here is the absolute Armageddon scenario. The state insurance departments also mandate insurance companies to put into these illustrations, okay, based off of the last 20 years, I believe it's 20 years, based off the last 20 years, a rolling 10-year period of time, that is the worst rolling 10-year period of time, how would this product have performed? What about the best rolling 10-year period of time, which may look better than our second ledger, right? But anyway, that box shows the best 10-year period of time. But then, as mentioned in that second ledger, very similar to that is, hey, the most recent 10-year period of time, how would this product have performed? So the illustrations are many times very confusing, almost all the time very confusing. Why is that? Because of regulations at its finest. But this construct of the 3 different points of confusion is pretty consistent across pretty much all indexed annuities. Why? Because it's standardized regulation is why. Hope that helps. Feel free to subscribe to this channel here, as well as go to the website below to subscribe to getting this stuff in your inbox.